Okay, I guess I'll say hello, everyone. I think we have, from what I could see, all of our entrepreneurs and residents attending at the moment. So my name is Jim Flynn. I am Assistant Dean of Research Business Development at UMass Amherst. In addition, I am also one of the founding, members of the Ventures at CICS program, the Entrepreneurship and Residence program at the College of Information and Computer Sciences. So we have a number of other EIRs that I would like to introduce you to. So I'm going to go through the names, and hopefully everybody is here. And as I speak your name, could you just say hello? And then if somebody's looking at the event, your picture will, or your video will pop up and people can see who you are. So I'm going to go in, well, probably in reverse chronological order. I'm going to introduce the EIRs and the newest first. So is Dawn Leaks out there? Okay, I guess we'll come back to Dawn. Next up, our next newest EIR is Jean Coyle. Do you want to say hello to everyone, Jean?
Hello.
Okay, well, we love having Jean with us. Jean is passionate about innovation and entrepreneurship. She's in fact built 3 different startups in 3 different industries, in financial services, manufacturing, and in technology. And under her direction, her areas of focus include innovative thinking, building and managing early stage companies, recognizing opportunities, and identifying risks. In my conversations with Jean, it also seems to me that she's really good at doing company turnarounds. So if you need a company whipped into shape, you would talk to Jean.
Hopefully there's not too many of those.
Jean is also, as I understand, a UMass Amherst parent. So we're happy to have parents participating with us too. So welcome, Jean, and thanks for letting me talk about you. Next up, I'd like to introduce you to Hope Ross Gibaldi. Hope, you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here.
All right, welcome, Hope. Hope is in fact a community manager, a community and engagement manager at Valley Ventures Mentors. It's an organization based in Western Massachusetts that's promoting startups and entrepreneurship in the Pioneer Valley and Western Massachusetts in general. So we're happy to, I was going to say steal, but really borrow Hope from time to time from VVM, because really we have a similar mission in trying to enable entrepreneurship in our area. I would say maybe UMass Amherst, maybe a little bit more Commonwealth-wide doing that, but we certainly want to promote that innovation and new businesses and economic activity. So next up, I want to talk about Brett Goldberg. You want to say hello, Brett?
Hey, everybody.
All right, thanks for being here. Brett actually owns his own software company in Great Barrington. It's called Synkware. And according to Brett's LinkedIn page, he graduated from Newton North High School and Yale University. So if you want to talk about building a software company, Brett is the guy to go to. And actually, I was reading a little bit about Synkware and some of the things you do. It sounds like really innovative stuff that you're actually integrating different accounting systems, and you're doing now stuff at trade shows. You want to mention anything about Synkware, Brett?
Yeah, so we are a software as a service company. The space that we're in is called supply chain integration. And so basically what that means is that we're plumbers. We help companies connect their systems to things that they don't natively speak to. And it's a lot of fun.
Great. Well, thank you, Brett. Next, I'll go back and I see that we have Dawn Leaks. Dawn, do you want to just say hi to everyone so we can see you?
Hi, I was having some technical difficulties, but hello.
We've all been there, Dawn. Dawn is the former CEO of Lioness Group. And by the way, I love the name. It's a global mass media company dedicated to creating innovative ways to empower and engage women across the globe. Under her direction, the company's popular digital magazine, Lioness, has grown exponentially, adding live and virtual content coaching, mentoring, training, and leadership programming to its offerings. Someday we'll have to get a coffee, Dawn, because I want to hear more about it. Sounds fascinating. But thank you for joining us, Dawn. And I think right now we want to go to our last but not least entrepreneur in residence, Gavin Andreessen. You want to say hi, Gavin?
Hey, everybody. Really glad to be here.
Okay. Gavin Andreessen is an entrepreneur and software developer. He's been involved in a number of startups. He's really well known for being the lead developer for the Bitcoin project from 2011 to 2015. And he was also chief scientist of the Bitcoin Foundation in 2017. So as we were talking last night, Gavin, at the end of this, if you stay till the end, he's going to tell you what the price of Bitcoin is going to be in 6 months. No, just kidding. Anyway, but he is definitely one of the OGs, as they say. I'm going to try to sound cool. The original gang for the whole crypto blockchain market. So welcome, Gavin, and look forward to talking to you tonight. So it looks like we have a bunch of people here. I'm going to ask if I see Brant Jikes is here, and I do want to say hello, Brant, because Brant is he's also actually the creator of the Ventures at CICS program, the EIR program as it is right now here. So Brant, do you just want to say hi?
Sure, I'll say hi. I'm the executive director of the Center for Data Science. I'm glad to see you're all here tonight. I'm glad we have such a great group of EIRs. One of the missions of the Center for Data Science is to help promote economic development in the Pioneer Valley and beyond. And one of the ways we try to do this is by having a program like this, having volunteer entrepreneurs and residents who can field inquiries and be sounding boards for faculty and students interested in new companies or just learning about the startup world. So I'm glad to see we're all here today, and I look forward to the rest of the program. Thank you, Jen.
Sure. I'll just add to that. Brant is one of the people at CICS that if you want to get stuff done, you go to Brant. So I try to work with him as much as possible because then I know that there's going to be somebody to do all the work. So that's it. So that is the introduction. We unfortunately lost one of our EIRs, had an issue come up and couldn't make it here. So I think what I want to do is I'm just going to start throwing out some questions to this virtual panel of EIRs, and we'll, as we go through, Brant, would you mind sort of being the filter for questions that might come in from the audience? So
happy to do that. I will monitor the chat. And so if attendees want to just submit questions to the chat, I will keep an eye on them and signal to Jim, maybe waving my hands, or you can pause periodically, Jim, and I can tell you if there are any questions.
Great, great.
And I noticed some people, I'm hoping that our operations manager, Randy, who's out there, will keep an eye on people and mute people who inadvertently are leaving their microphones open and that sort of thing. Okay, thanks.
Good, good. Yeah, I think just a little bit about the agenda. What we're going to do is have this panel discussion where I'll put up some, just to get the ice broken, I'll put up some questions, and then we'll let the EIRs volunteer to answer them. And if if after that there are some follow-up questions from the audience, we'll let people, hopefully Brant will be able to filter those and consolidate those questions. After about 45 minutes or so of this, we're actually going to try to use a feature of the platform that we're using and do some speed.
Can you do that on this little phone area? Oh, hi.
Okay.
All right, somebody is not muted. I think that's Nathan.
Okay. If we hear Wheel of Fortune in the background, we'll somebody didn't turn their TV off. Okay, so with that said, I want to kick off the initial discussion and throw out a question. Okay, I actually have a story to tell first with this one. One of my first meetings as an EIR was with a PhD student, and he had a sort of, I'd say it wasn't a really like fully baked idea to do a startup. And I talked to him about it, and I said, well, my assessment was that it was a little bit risky and maybe needs to be developed a little bit more. And he said, well, I also have a job offer and actually it was from Amazon, and to work in their artificial intelligence group in Cambridge. And I said, well, you've already accepted this job. Why don't you want to do it? And he said, no, I think I want to be in a startup. I want to be able to do things on my own, and I want to change the world. And my natural inclination to somebody like this would be, yeah, take a chance. And I'm an EIR, so I'm supposed to tell people how to be innovative. But really, after talking to him for a while, I said, listen, take the job at Amazon in Cambridge, network like crazy, because right now you're an international student with no experience, and you'll have a PhD. In 2 years, you'll have 2 years of experience at a marquee name company, or 3 years. And if you decide to do something, then you would have been networking in Cambridge with everyone that you can find. You'd have a Rolodex at that point, and you'd have a resume, and you would be 29 years old. So, take the job that you've been offered and you've accepted, because that's really the honorable thing to do to begin with. But also I had to, in spite of my tendency to tell people to start their own business, for a risk-adjusted return for what he was going to do, I really needed to advise him, or else it'd be malpractice for me to tell him not to do what he was already headed for doing. So that was a story that resulted in my question that I'll put out in a long-winded way, is for an entrepreneur asking a question: should a would-be entrepreneur launch a startup now, or, and I actually invented a word, Google's on Bookly, meaning some sort of an amalgamation of Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. What should they do? What are the advantages and disadvantages of pursuing a career in the startup world, or taking the corporate route? What should young people consider as they start out their career? So I've already added a lot of commentary to that, and I'll just open it up for the other EIRs if they have something to say about, what type of career advice would they have given, say, the PhD student or somebody else. And I'm sure everybody on this panel has mentored people before, so they probably have some words of wisdom for that. Anyone want to talk? Okay, Brett.
All right, so in a sentence, hold off for as long as you can. And here's the reason. So in your entrepreneurial career, you're going to go through 3 phases. And phase 1, you're going to have no idea what you're doing. Phase 2, you're going to know what you're doing, but maybe you won't enjoy it that much. And phase 3, you're going to know what you're doing and you're going to start enjoying it. And so the object is to minimize phase 1, because phase 1 is where you lose your life savings. And so if you can learn as much as you can on somebody else's dime before you jump in, that's the best thing to do. The other thing is that before you jump into a venture, try to be married or in a committed relationship. Because what happens in a venture is you totally lose track of the passage of time. And I've seen it happen that people wake up in their 40s and say, oh, wait a second, I was supposed to find a mate. And what happens when you're married or in a committed relationship is that your time all of a sudden has value. And so when somebody says, hey, you know, I'd love to sit down for 6 hours and brainstorm with you, you kind of say, well, my wife or significant other may have something to say about that. And when people try to pull you into conference calls and Zooms, your time has value. And also, you're not going to try to do everything yourself. You're going to delegate, and you're going to create a scalable enterprise, and you're going to operate totally differently. I got married when I was 31, and prior to age 31, I never made a penny. And so I would say the crucial decision, even more than big company startup, is take an assessment of your life circumstances and ask yourself if you're ready to jump down the rabbit hole and disappear for a few years. And make sure that the rest of your life is in order before you do that.
Anybody else want to add to that? That was great, Brett.
I'll share.
Okay, Jean.
So I agree with everything you've said. I think in this day and age where everybody is expecting everything to come quickly, it's a huge marathon going into a startup, and whether it has VC money or if it doesn't. It took us 8 years. I had 10 years behind me to build up a company where I had already created and had the customer base. So it takes a long time to do something effectively. And the other concept I just want to share, there's a Japanese concept called Ikigai. Does anyone know what that is? Yes. So for those of you who are shaking your head, maybe I should defer to you, but I actually didn't know about this myself. But essentially, if you can imagine, loosely translated, it's the path to life fulfillment. And it consists of 4 themes. If you can imagine 4 concentric circles of your passion, what you love to do, your profession, what somebody will pay you to do, your vocation, what you're good at, and then mission is essentially what the world needs. And the intersection of those 4 concentric circles is what people find a way to life fulfillment. But the issue is most people don't know what they're good at or what they're passionate at until they go and do some things. So to Brett's point, it's the most meaningful thing is just to try as many things as you can possibly do, talk to as many people as you possibly can, because it's an emerging strategy. And until you get to the point where I can identify those 4 circles, you won't be able to, whether it's for a startup or for another company, you won't be able to fulfill your own individual needs. Because I think the other thing is we're just all wired very differently. So there's no answer for anybody unless you figure it out yourself.
Great points, Jean. Yeah, as you both were speaking, I was also thinking, you know, one of the dangers of when you do get your life in order and you're married and you have children, and maybe this is really just for myself because I'm maybe a little bit less considerate. You got to not neglect that family too, and you know that's pretty important to start thinking about, you know, where your priorities are and paying attention. There's, you know, if you have a 6-year-old kid, they're not going to be 6-year-old forever. So you gotta savor those moments too. Just a consideration. I really almost has nothing to do with entrepreneurship, just life in general.
If I could add something quickly as well, I was thinking too, along this question, that there's nothing's saying that you can't have a day job, have a full-time job, and be working on your business on the side, kind of in your off time, in your off time. That a lot of times when you're starting off, you might not necessarily have the business plan, but that doesn't mean you can't start kind of working on exploring your ideas and kind of putting them in motion and finding a way to start small. And so, I see a lot of the people that I work with, who I've worked with through E4All as well as VVM, they're people with full-time jobs, but have these great ideas. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't go into them, explore them, but there is benefit in maybe, like you said, Jim, taking that job, doing the networking, learning all the things that you can from those opportunities, and still putting things in motion kind of on the side. I'm not an advocate for burning yourself out. Worth exploring those.
Great points, Hope. I would sort of, this is getting a little bit away from the subject, but one of the things I have noticed, particularly when I mentor really young would-be entrepreneurs, is that they're a little bit overly optimistic about things because they've read in the paper, or they've watched the movie The Social Network, and they think the same thing will happen to them, or if they have an idea or a half-baked idea, they really are not realistic about things like funding, how much money that they need, how much when they're gonna run out of money, and how easy it is to get that, because they've heard that, VCs are just throwing money at people. So I remember an experience about a year or two ago when I talked to somebody, and they were looking to raise like $15 million. And I said, well, you have to be realistic about your fundraising prospects and when you can get it. And he's like, no. He goes, I'm telling all my partners that, we're not going to get this until July. And I looked at him and I said, it's May. You're not going to get a meeting with a VC before July. Never mind the sort of 6 months and marathon you're going to be at a minimum after they tell you, yeah, we want to fund you, of due diligence and everything, and negotiate and everything else that's going to happen. So there is that sort of word of caution. Lucky things do happen sometimes, but you can't always count on it. So I don't know, Gavin, do you have anything to add to this discussion?
No, I think I agree with everything everybody said. I mean, my career, I started working at a pretty big company. There was a fast growing company in Silicon Valley. And it was great to get that experience under my belt. I mean, networking with the people you're working with, I think, is the great way to do it. Research shows that if you're an entrepreneur in your 30s or 40s, you're more likely to be successful than an entrepreneur in their 20s. That doesn't mean that, you might not stumble across some fantastic little startup in your 20s that you join and it goes to the moon and becomes the next Amazon. But, realistically, for most people, I think it really does make a lot of sense to kind of get your life in order, get your finances in order, get to a place where, you can take a big risk and it'll be okay. In your 20s, I think, you probably already have enough big risks going on that you probably don't want to try to start a startup unless you're with somebody who's done it before, or unless you have parents who maybe can fund you $15 million out of spare pocket change or something really, really wacky like that. So yeah, I mean, as an EIR, I feel like my job often is to tell people, don't do what you're thinking of doing because it's really hard and it's probably a bad idea to do it this time, which feels a little weird because we're all about entrepreneurship. But, starting your own company is not the only way to be an entrepreneur. There are a lot of other ways to be entrepreneurial at big companies, at small companies, or on your own. So, I just encourage everybody to keep an open mind and keep your eye out for the opportunities, because you never know when an opportunity will be there, which is why, I completely agree. Talking to lots of people and trying lots of things is the key.
Good, thanks. Are there any questions from the audience? If you want to ask it, you can put it in the ask you just to put it in the chat, and Brant is looking out for you if you want to do that.
So far,
So-
nothing.
Okay. Yeah, there's almost, I think any one of these questions we can go on and talk about forever, but I think we'll move on to the next question to try to cover more ground. The next subject matter is what I'm going to term a question of inspiration or perspiration. And with that, I mean, is a question that you might get from a young person or a would-be entrepreneur is, should I go for the money or should I go for happiness? What should I be looking for in a career? Should I be trying to make as much money as I can, or should I just be looking for fulfillment? So should students and recent graduates focus on doing what they're good at, or should they just follow their passion? And what would you recommend and why? So I have something to say here, but I think I'll see if any of my other entrepreneurs would like to add. How about you, Dawn? Do you have any commentary on that? Oh, you're muted.
I said something really amazing. You guys missed it. It's interesting because I used to listen to Jim Rohn tapes in the car. I used to do a lot of driving. So I'm dating myself because we're actually cassette tapes. And he talked about taking jobs for skills and knowledge versus money or happiness. And so when I heard it, it sounded interesting to me, and I kind of adopted that. And so I started taking opportunities based on what I could learn and what I thought the potential was to come out with some amazing new skills. And so kind of going back to the last question, I didn't answer because my career has been all over the place. I really tried everything and anything. I started businesses in my 20s that failed. In some that I just walked away from because I got bored. I've done a lot of different things in my career, but what happened was I was picking up skills and I was picking up knowledge. And so then, when I really started to get serious and settling into a career, which ended up being in communications, I was amazing. I had all these transferable skills from all these positions that I had taken. And I did change directions based on what was making me happy. If I felt like I worked at, it was started out as 9X, turned to Bell Atlantic, then it became Verizon. And I did it was customer service for installations for a long time, and it was what I call a soul killer. And so I did end up actually retiring from there from a very young age. They offered a package and I took it. Yeah, so I left there to try to find happiness. And I think, I'm all over the place with my answer, but the answer is that I believe, take it for the now, take a position or start a business or, for what you can learn and what you can get out of it, who you can meet, experiences in knowledge. That's what I did. And it paid off later because for the first few years of my career, I had no idea. I didn't have a direction. And so I'm sure there's people on here like that. You don't have a direction. You don't have the next 25 years of your life figured out. And you may just kind of wing it, which is what I was kind of doing. And, I took jobs based on what I could learn.
That's sort of interesting, Dawn, because as you're saying that, it seems like you didn't take the advice that we gave for the last question, meaning that you sort of
I thought it was great advice though.
Bide your time. But it may be just your particular personality. I mean, you just ran into the oncoming fire. You just charged ahead, and you learned from it.
Yeah, and I think this all someone mentioned just like how you feel about risk. I guess I embraced risk. If I didn't like something, I'd say, you know what, I'll find something else, and I would just leave and go. I've done I won't go through it, but so many different things. But I was never, but see, for me, so when we talk about having a family, you know, I didn't have a family, and I purposely didn't make major purchases. I didn't have a house, things like that, so that I could be quick and nimble, you know, so that if I wanted to try something different, I could. And so that kind of worked out for me.
Yeah, so if you wanted the nice house and the nice car when you're in your 20s, you would have been, your risk profile couldn't have been
Right.
that flexible as it was. Interesting.
I'll add. So
Okay.
I know. So I was, when I was turning around, so I'd never been in charge. And so when I was asked by a friend to run a union sheet metal company that was losing lots of money, and I had never been in a leadership position, I've always been in small teams that had very discrete responsibilities. I was trying to figure out, how do I motivate people in a space that I knew nothing about? So one of the things that I read about was, I think his name is Frederick Hirschberg. So I think this is so clear to me now. It just wasn't at the time. But, you know, Dawn's path, when you don't know what your passion is, or you have many passions, and you don't know what all your strengths are, because until you do all of this, right? But at the same time, you don't want to, you know, be married 4 times before you figure out to be a better spouse. So there's certain variables you have to consider. How do we teach ourselves to think better? Right? It's not all about accumulating a lot of information in an academic setting and learning so many different facts. There's so much information out there, but how do you learn to think better and make better decisions? And so I was reading things about motivation and mental models. And I don't know if anyone already knows all of this, but this is all new to me. So when it comes to why are people motivated to do, you know, find their passion or their strengths or work in a certain area, there's basically 2 different types of factors that are meaningful. Because, you know, I've always believed that you could never motivate someone simply by paying them. And compensation happens to be one of those what they call hygiene factors. So a hygiene factor is something that if you don't do, you will be dissatisfied. So if you don't make enough money, if you don't work in an environment with relationships that you enjoy, if you don't have job security, if you don't have status, those are the things are sort of basic, or what they call hygiene motivation factors. But then there's the motivating factors that I think, Don, you were also alluding to, but again, I was trying to structure this myself. What really motivates us to do things that we want to do is when it comes down to personal growth or responsibility. So it's not truly just passion, it's really where you're becoming, you're doing the challenging work you've always wanted to do. So as long as you can have both sets of factors, motivation factors and hygiene factors, I think that's where you get to a better place in terms of where you want to go. And your path, you know, because we're biological human beings. And even if you have a very focused, you know, I have a husband who knew what he wanted to do when he was in 4th grade. And I have one daughter who thinks they know what to do, and they're 22. And then I've got the rest of the family, including myself, that didn't really know what they wanted to do. But as long as you you choose a path and you take it, and you are adaptable and flexible, and you learn along the way, you reflect, eventually you get to the part where you find the challenging work you want to do, and the areas that make you feel very responsible and want to grow in that area, because all the factors are taken care of, I think helps you figure out your path.
Good. Thank you, Jean. Anybody else have something to add to that at this point? Okay. Well, I think Gavin was first, and then Brett. He hit the buzzer. Gavin hit the buzzer first, so you go.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, you know, the question was money versus passion. And for me, I mean, money was never an objective, but I definitely think it was kind of impact on the world, or, you know, I've always been doing software stuff. And when I thought about, you know, what software do I want to do next, part of my thinking was, well, I want to work on software that a lot of people are going to use. I just like the idea of creating something that, you know, has a broad impact that a lot of people are going to be excited about, that a lot of people are going to use. And I have friends from, you know, my time in Silicon Valley who I don't think they've thought about that. I had some friends who thought more about money, and that's fine. I had friends who kind of felt more academic, and maybe they're really passionate about some particular little, aspect of software. I started out doing 3D computer graphics software. And I have friends who are really passionate about 3D computer graphics software, and they would never think of doing anything besides, creating really awesome looking computer graphics. And for me, it really wasn't about 3D computer graphics software. I'm a software developer. I love writing software, but I've done all sorts of different kinds of software over the course of my career. And my the thing that motivated me personally really was, is this software going to be used by a lot of people? Will it have a broad impact on the world? And from that, money came along, which was a nice side benefit. But I really think it depends on your personality and what gives you personal pleasure. What will make you feel like at the end of your life, I've done something. And for a lot of people, that can be being, the very best database administrator in the world or whatever. You can be passionate about lots of things, and I think that's fine. And I think different people will find the things that make them feel like they've had a worthwhile effect on their world and their life and their family and their friends and all of that other stuff. So I think it really depends.
Thank you, Gavin. I guess one of the reasons I added this question to begin with is because I was sort of getting into the habit of just automatically telling young people to just follow your passion. Don't worry about money. But in talking and seeing some of my friends and their careers go along and then watching myself go along, I sort of modified that a little bit. And now my main advice, if I just summarize it, is find something that you like doing, that you're good at, and that you could be great at, and then become great at it. Because when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. I didn't say I want to be the world's best fixed income tax accountant. But if somebody is the world's best fixed income tax accountant, they probably make a lot of money. They fly private jets, and they the accolades come, and most likely they like doing it at some point, and they get some satisfaction out of it. So that there is, I think, maybe I think in trying to give people good advice, at least in my view right now, is more the priority I tell people is that find something that you're good at, and then work like heck to be great at it. Because if you're great at it, then you'll need a lot of other successes in life, and have a nice house and that car that we talked about before, and hopefully you'll find happiness in doing it. If you don't like doing it, you're probably not going to be good at it. You're probably not going to be great at it. So that's sort of I guess something that has sort of changed in me a little bit in the last few years. Right. Any other comments on that,
Yeah.
Brett? Oh, you wanted to go.
So I would definitely say, if you're going to be an entrepreneur at some point, try to find something that you would do even if nobody paid you to do it. And the reason is that if you're not totally captivated by what you're doing, you're not going to ever innovate or disrupt the space that you're in. So to be innovative and disruptive, you have to think about what you're doing, 16 hours a day, and you have to try to figure out how it could be done better. And you have to really care about what you're doing, which you're not going to do if it's just a job. And so if your plan is to be an entrepreneur, definitely, figure out what that thing is. In my case, it's writing software. For other people, it's something else, but figure out what that thing is that you could do without being paid for it and be perfectly happy. And then see if there's somebody who will pay you to do it. And the other thing that I would say is, throughout your entrepreneurial career, you're going to be pulled in two directions. And so one direction is to do cool new things that you've never done before. And the other direction is to keep on doing the same thing and make money doing it, because you never make money when you do something for the first time. But biologically, you have to take into account that making money doesn't release endorphins, but learning does. And so you have to keep yourself nourished on a few fronts.
A question did come in that was aimed at Gavin. So should I throw that question over to Gavin, Jim? I saw your lips say yes, though I didn't hear you. So here it goes. So Gavin, one of the audience members, on your point about creating software that has impact, you're being asked, well, how do you address this gap, this perceived gap between creating software? I mean, creating software is creating software, but also getting it used by a lot of people and actually having great impact. And then it seems like it's not always obvious that merely having software used by lots of people equates to having great impact. So you want to sort of explore a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think software developers and geeks really often underestimate the value of marketing and the difficulty of actually getting the things that you create used by lots of people. They think, if I build it, they will come. And that's sometimes true. And you hear the stories of lucky software developers who did create some web service that just took off by, some viral thing, but that's usually not true. Usually there is marketing and there is, other people on the team who are going to help your software to be super successful. And that's another reason why, I usually tell people, unless you have a team or unless you have, people with experience in doing things like hiring people to help market your software or figuring out how to market your software, you probably shouldn't form a startup. Because writing the software is a fairly small part of the problem of having an impact most of the time. Now there are ways of kind of piggybacking on successful projects. You could be an open source software developer, contribute to some open source software project that's already highly successful. If you wanted to do something really cool with the Linux kernel, right? You could theoretically dive in and start contributing to that project and have an impact that way. Now, as for do you have an impact if your software is used by lots of people? I guess I think yes. I think if lots of people are using the thing that you create, then you're having an impact. I think kind of almost by definition. At least in my head, right? I mean, think of game developers, right? Game developers, if I was a game developer and one of my startups was actually creating games. So I have been a game developer in the past. But do games have an impact on the world? Well, they're not solving climate change, but I think they are entertaining people, and entertainment's a perfectly valid way of having an impact on the world. So, in the way I view things, yes, if the thing that you created is enjoyed by a lot of people or used by a lot of people or makes lots of people's lives even a little bit easier, then yeah, you're having an impact and you should be proud of that, regardless of how much money you make. I think that's something at the end of your life you could look back and say, I had 100,000 people using this thing that I created. That's awesome, right? You made those people's lives a little bit better. If you weren't, then they probably wouldn't be using that thing that you created.
Thank you, Gavin. I'm going to throw another question out that I think the various EIRs might have an opinion on and should maybe respond to and wave their hands. A junior math and CS undergrad is asking about, is it worth getting an MBA? And really, there's a broader question about, I mean, a specific question about, should somebody interested in entrepreneurship try to get that kind of credential? And maybe there's a more general question just about what kind of educational credentials are more or less essential or highly recommended if you're going to pursue entrepreneurship. So any EIRs want to field that one?
I'll take that one. So
Go for it.
I do have an MBA and I did get it while I was working as opposed to as part of a startup. I'm also an investor. So when you're looking at a pitch deck, degrees do make a difference when they're trying to assess the quality of the team without really knowing much about the team. But I have to tell you that there's not an MBA that I know of, maybe the alt MBA from Seth Godin, but I don't think there's an MBA that allows you or will help you be a better entrepreneur as long as you know the ingredients of being a great, successful startup. I do want to compliment what Gavin was saying, because I didn't know this at the time either. So if I grew up in a very traditional business environment, there were no accelerators at the time. I think the first was in 2005, 2006 with the Y Combinator and Techstars. Now there's accelerators everywhere. So for your question, because there's another question about any hacks, there's an accelerator, there's tier 1 accelerator programs with Y Combinator and Techstars. Now Techstars, for example, is across industries. They have global partners. So it wouldn't surprise me even locally here with Lego, whether they have their own partnership in order to accelerate or find innovation, because I'm working with an entrepreneur that's part of the Stanley Black & Decker Techstars program. So Stanley Black & Decker is a global player. They're trying to find the innovation in their space. They partner with someone who's used to accelerating or building startups. So it serves two purposes. One, it helps teach the Stanley Black & Decker middle managers how to innovate and find innovation. At the same time, they also get to basically get the hand-picked versions of anything that might be happening that will also help their company grow. So you can find your marketing. There are startups that find you your teams. There are some startups that require you to have teams. There are some people who, if you have an idea, you don't have to have any traction. So you have to find the right accelerator that fits your needs. But whether you're doing it by type of software or the industry that you want to sell in or the resources that you need, all of that is something you just want to consider in order to build your startup. I was a bootstrapper, so I have to qualify my answer about the 8 to 10 years is because I did it without any outside money. I probably, as a tech person, because again, I wasn't a tech person, I think most of the time you probably want to scale as quickly as you can if that's something you're going to build. But I do want to interject one more thing, and that is I built a solution that wasn't disruptive. It was something that was sorely needed. I happened to find the problem. We as a team solved it. What Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett try to do, for example, is they try to dominate in a small space. So that's what I did as a startup with the team. You just want to be able to make enough of a difference that it helps someone, what they call a beachhead market, so that you can gain traction from it. But all the resources are there. So you have it at school too. I mean, but there's resources everywhere to help you do this. There's more resources that I'm overwhelmed at the amount of sales and marketing resources that are available for anybody to do anything on any scale. It's crazy.
I'd love to hear from both Hope and Dawn on the educational question, though I notice we're at 10 minutes until the end of the session. So I'll defer to Jim regarding how we spend our remaining time.
Yeah, I think, well, in the next question, I was going to start picking on other people. So the next question I want to put to the panel is, what is the meaning of life? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just saying that because we've been very philosophical so far, and I'm going to switch gears a little bit to sort of be more, pragmatic, looking for opportunities, and that's why I'm going to pick on Hope for this, because she has her position at VVM gives her a little bit more of a bird's eye view of a lot of people that are already starting companies and looking for opportunities. So. This next question has to do with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and how has the pandemic impacted entrepreneurs what are the short-term and long-term implications of the pandemic that aspiring entrepreneurs should consider? So I want to lead off with Hope here and say, are you seeing opportunities now coming to VVM, for example, or other places that maybe you wouldn't have seen or wouldn't have made sense a year ago, or maybe a little over a year ago? Take it away, Hope.
Thank you. Yeah. So, it's interesting. It's a very interesting time to start a business that has a lot of challenges as well as a lot of opportunities. There's two different ways to see everything. And I think that there are entire industries that have been completely disrupted by the pandemic and will continue to see the effects of this on small businesses moving forward, not just this year, but I think moving forward. But one of the things that VVM always preaches is the importance of being able to pivot and be flexible. And I think that if you're able to see new ways of relating to your customers and new ways of doing business and are open to seeing different revenue streams, then existing businesses are navigating and have navigated the pandemic. And some businesses are cropping up and have done better than they ever did. And there are a lot of businesses that are really thriving under these new circumstances, but it's not without acknowledging the fact that it has been absolutely disruptive to a lot of other businesses. And so I think right now, if you're willing to be flexible, if you're willing to seek alternative ways to build relationships with your customers, and if you're focused on the problem and how to solve the problem, there is no shortage of problems currently to be solved. So, I think entrepreneurship really is a great way to be able to do that. So there is, I'm a silver linings person, so I do believe that there's a lot of opportunity as well.
Good. Thank you, Hope. Okay. I want to ask Dawn, have you seen any opportunities that the pandemic has created? And we're all going to sign a non-disclosure if you tell us your next great idea. I'm just kidding. But anything out there that looks interesting, or where people should look if they're seeing opportunities?
Well, I'm going to be really honest here. So my business partner and I, we had an exit in July of last year. And since that time, I haven't been looking at anything entrepreneurial or doing anything. I've been enjoying myself and just relaxing and decompressing from the past 6 years. So I don't know about that. But what I will say is I wanted to answer the question about a hack, because somebody asked about a hack for sales and marketing. If you're a techie person, I think every time someone starts a startup, they think they should run it. And they think they should be in charge of it. That's what they envision in their mind. Like, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to do a startup. And I think it's important to say that kind of a hack, you don't have to be in charge. You don't have to be the CEO, and you can find, the complementary team members to do the marketing, the sales, the person to come on and actually run the business while you do the thing you're most passionate about. That's what my business partner did. She's a journalist, a publisher, an editor, and she started Lioness, and she didn't know how to run a business. And so that's where she came and found me. And that I knew how to run a business, and so we partnered and we were able to scale this thing together. And so I think sometimes pulling the ego out and saying, it was hard for her, because I came in and instantly was like, okay, that's not right. We're not doing that. Change this. And it was hard for her. And it was hard for me, because I'm like, this is her baby. I'm coming in and just like trashing it. But, in order for us to really try to scale, this is the direction we need to go. And so I think that's something to really think about. If your head is in, software, you're in the nitty gritty of building something, and that's where you want to be, you can stay there, but find the people to help you, scale the business. And then the last thing I'll say is in terms of opportunities in the pandemic. So we had a digital media company. And so we're giving news and information primarily for female entrepreneurs to help them launch and scale businesses. And so when the pandemic hit, people were looking for reliable news they can trust, reliable information. It was a good time for the business. My partner and I were at a time when we were thinking, we either going to have to go out and raise money, or maybe we can see if we can get an exit. And so so the climate presented a unique opportunity for us because, you know, the right person could come in and see that, yeah, the business, we were really primed right there to scale. And there's great opportunity because more people are buying digitally. They're home. They want to engage things online. They want this information. People are looking for alternate ways to make money. And, you know, we actually just put out some feelers to folks to say, you know, we're are you interested in buying our company? And we engaged in a few really good conversations, and then we found a fit that was good for us. And so I think the other thing is people think of the, you know, the huge exits, but maybe there's a smaller exit that'll be, it's good for you financially, and it's good, you know, going to people or business that can take your business to the next level. You know, there's alternate exits, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You know, everybody's looking for that the big thing. This was big for us, you know, but it wasn't a multi-million-dollar exit. So I think that that was an opportunity that came. I think the conditions created by the pandemic probably made that happen faster than it would have otherwise.
Yeah, I would just add sort of, impressed with your former partner because it's one thing about an entrepreneur is that it's really sort of hard to bring in somebody else when it's your baby and to let go of that control. But they had the presence of mind to know that there were things that they weren't good at and needed to bring in you to help out with that. So that was a pretty good skill set to be able to recognize and do that.
Yeah.
Anyone else have something to add to that? Okay, try to get through some of these questions. So unless, I don't know, I was hoping somebody would tell me what the next great pandemic related idea is, but I think it is one of those things where probably after somebody founds the next company, it's going to be obvious to everyone. So if you've noticed, we happen to have pretty good gender diversity on the EIR panel, and that brings us to the next question. And there's actually, I have a little bit of a story behind this. It's I was speaking to one of our colleagues at UMass, and she told me that when she was in college, she was majoring in computer science and actually dropped out. And that because there was almost no other women in the major, and there were no women professors. Decided for that reason, not, although really good at the courses and doing well, but decided to move on. And but then I guess subsequent to that, the school hired a woman professor, and she went back and got a minor in computer science. And really the whole reason was because she said she finally had a role model. And it was just something, you know, as that. And I guess was sort of eye-opening for me that I think it's so important to have role models. And in this case, so which brings me to the question of, in computer science in particular, one of the things we struggle with is that we have only a really small percentage of computer science majors are women. And the same is typical for other fields like engineering, for example. And what advice would my colleagues on the EIR panel give to female students that are interested in studying computer science or another type of field that traditionally and still in many cases, unfortunately, is dominated by men? Are there any things that you could say? Is there any, you know, or even if you want to give advice to the school as itself, what could we do to get more women into computer science and majors that they traditionally, that we don't have a high percentage of women studying now? So Hope, you have a smile on your face. Do you have anything to add here? Is there?
Well, I had, my thoughts were to be bold, to make noise, to take up space, you know, and to be kind of unapologetic about your presence there and know that you're there for a reason. If it's what you're meant to be doing, then you just kind of continue to um, follow that path. And if we are in places where there's not traditionally a lot of gender diversity, then kind of it's our opportunity and responsibility to be able to kind of bust through and break the mold, and that we're leading the way for the next generation of people to feel comfortable and being those role models that people are looking for.
Good, thank you. Jean, how about you? Is any thoughts on this topic?
So I'm from a big family. I'm one of 8. There's 3 girls. So I've always had a lot of brothers. Then I went into industries that were predominantly male. But I have to say, I've never really thought about it much. And it may be because of the roles and the decisions I made along the way, where I was pretty blind to the difference. I do notice, for example, even preparing for the session, there's a fundamental difference to how the women were handling the prep versus the men. I just have learned to embrace adding value and however it comes naturally to me, whether it's because I'm a female or because of the way I'm wired, because I'm not wired in a lot of female ways, traditional female ways, but I do recognize that with everyone, there are, simply your strengths, your weaknesses, your interests, all of that stuff makes us all such individual players in the space. I think the biggest thing has to do with, like you said, getting very good at what you are. So there's a competitive advantage, because I think it's fair to say that it's better to be stronger than weaker. It's better to be wiser. So there's certain things you always just want to strive for, whether you're a male or a female. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but it is the way I've lived my life.
Yeah, it's a very personal answer, which is great. I guess maybe to switch it up a little bit, I'm going to ask Dawn: would you give any advice to the College of Information and Computer Sciences? I mean, how could we do better at getting more women into our programs? Is it role models? Are there other ways that we could do a better job of it, or is it just going to be a long fight to make these changes?
Well, I think there's a lot of discourse around gender, and really there's some research that says that in elementary school, around elementary school time, girls are discouraged from science and different things that are not deemed feminine. And so I think early intervention, if the school wanted to do programs with elementary schools to really expose young girls to some of the concepts. I know when I was in elementary school for over the summer, one year I did College for Kids at Stick in Springfield, and we built little transistor radios, and it was really interesting for me. I think you have to grab them early. And then, this is such a complex issue, because then once you start attracting girls to the program, we're now talking about they're up against bias, implicit bias, explicit bias, stereotypes, all the different things that come into play with gender in the society that we live in. So how do you create a culture that now once they're there, they feel welcome to stay? And they feel included, and they feel, and they're not forced to just conform to what the guys are doing, but they can actually show up, and they have the space and the comfort to be themselves and to show up how they show up in the world. And so these are big issues that, we're not going to solve them, on this panel, but I think if it's something that the school really wants to tackle, there's got to be a multi kind of pronged approach where it's the marketing piece to get girls interested in coming into the school, and then what are you going to do in terms of culture for in order for them to stay.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Any no questions from the audience here? Or anyone want to? The audience wants to make a comment. You could put that in the chat too, and we'll be happy to I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of thoughts on all the topics that we're talking about today. But if not, what I'll do is I'll kind of move on to that. And I'm going to skip a question and go on because we actually have until 10 after. We won't be late, Brant, because we had 10 minutes of introductions in an hour. But I really sort of like this because and one is, and the question is, can we be superhuman? And this comes out of a kind of a long car ride I had with my 13-year-old daughter and talking about superpowers. And it just started out as like a goofy thing. What superpowers would you like to have? And I said I'd like to be able to fly, and she said she'd like to be able to read minds. And I kind of talked her out of it because I think it would be sort of a curse in the long run to be able to read minds. But the conversations kind of went toward, and I said, there are superpowers that you can actually have. And she's like, well, that's crazy. That's not superpowers are things you by definition can have. And I said, no, well, being able to sell yourself and your ideas, that, in my opinion, is a superpower. People who can do that can do wonderful things. If you can sell yourself and your ideas to people, then doors will open up for you. And it's not something that will be outsourced somewhere else or maybe even automated. It's just a skill that will serve you your whole life. And whether you're a salesperson or you're a doctor, for that matter, a doctor has to sell themselves to people and convince them to do what's healthy for them. So the other things are making good decisions, being able to take maybe the emotion out of things, being able to evaluate a situation that doesn't have perfect information, and then make the best decision possible. As somebody who's made good decisions and bad decisions in their life, I would say, yeah, being able to more consistently make good decisions is a superpower. So, and that's why, with that long-winded story, I would say, what would you say is a superpower? And if you had to give advice to a student or a young person who wants to be an entrepreneur, what superpowers should they try to develop to make their lives better? So the first person who smiles on video is going to get called. Dawn, you're it.
Well, I am kind of like a Marvel movie nerd, right? So I'm all into the superhero thing right now, Marvel Universe, the MCU. But in real life, I don't think I believe in the concept of a superpower. I don't think that obviously you're not going to be bitten by a radioactive spider or fall into a vat of acid or something and gain superpowers. But I think my belief is that we're all born with a specific superpower or two. Some people just naturally have it, influence. I don't know if you ever watch American Greed on CNBC. I love that show, but these people have the gift of influence. They can talk you out of money and everything else. Now, whether you use your superpower for good or evil, that's up to you. But I think what I would suggest, because I'm a life coach in addition to, whatever else I have going on, and I think I would encourage people to find out what your specific superpower is. And there are profilers you can take. There's something called Strength Finders, and it helps you find your strengths, the things that you do best, and tap into those things and dial them up. Because again, I subscribe to that school of let me find what I'm really good at and I'm strong at, and let me double down there and do that even better. And then I'm going to outsource for the things that I'm not so good at. I'm going to put a team around me for those other things. I'm going to find people with complementary superpowers to mine, and then we're going to go out and dominate the universe. So that's my that's my approach to the superhero philosophy. But
You're scaring me now.
Every single one of us has one, but I think it's worth some time and some self-reflection to figure out what yours is. So you're not spending a lot of time. Sometimes, especially if something doesn't come natural to you, it's very hard to go. It almost feels like beating your head up against a wall trying to build this skill. Find that thing that you're amazing at, and then find other ways to complement yourself. I mean, bring in some other folks, put a team around you that can do the things that you don't do as well.
Great. Thank you, Dawn. Anyone else want to chime in here? Any other superpowers we should be looking at that we haven't discussed yet?
Gavin, did you raise your hand? Sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. I was just going to, well, I have a secret superpower, and that's forgetting people's names. But I haven't found a use for that superpower that's actually useful. But I do think one of my superpowers is kind of connecting things that people haven't connected before and seeing how things connect. And that's kind of a very vague superpower. But I think if you can find that in yourself, that's really great for an entrepreneur, because so many entrepreneurial ideas are taking two things that at first glance look like they might be completely different, but putting them together in an interesting new way. And so, if you're thinking of being an entrepreneur and you do notice that you notice connections where other people don't see connections, that could be your superpower. And that could be a really awesome thing to leverage and look at and do and come up with new ideas.
Great. Brant, are there, there's seem to be a few more questions in the chat.
There is, though. I think Hope had a response to the superpower question, right?
Go ahead, Hope.
I was going to say time management is an absolute superpower, and being able to make the best use of your time. And part of that for me is also, I was talking to Jean about this question. We were discussing what our answers would be. And I was saying that self-care, I feel like, is a superpower, and making and prioritizing time to take care of yourself. That's not something that's necessarily glorified in society, but I think it's really, really important. And so a big part of my time management strategy is also to block out time for self-care, because I'm no good to anybody else if I'm burnt out.
Cool.
Great.
Cool.
That time management is a great one. That's especially if you're an entrepreneur, because there's no end of things that you could be doing. It's a matter of prioritizing what you should be doing at that point. Okay. Any other?
So there was a question that I think is a good one. In fact, I was thinking if Brett's still out there, his video's off, I would pitch at him first. And there's just a general question I think any of the EIRs would be able to speak to. But this one is about generally, basically, your opinions or advice on getting better at selling yourself and your ideas. And Brett, I can't think of anyone that I know as well as you who's so good at selling ideas, even the things that we've just talked about over breakfast at Essalon.
Yeah, so I mean, the main thing that I would say is don't sell. The first thing you have to do is listen. And what you're listening for is pain. In other words, you can't sell ultimately if you don't have empathy. And so you have to listen to your prospects and your clients really, really carefully to ultimately differentiate between real pain and just venting. And when you've identified something that constitutes real pain, then that further subdivides into real pain and real pain that somebody will pay for to find a solution to. And so if you're a good coach and if you're a good listener, you're gonna be really good at selling your idea and yourself to whether it's prospects or clients or investors, because you're going to be able to feel them and you're going to be able to produce what they're looking for. And so I would say never ever think of yourself as a salesman, and always think of yourself as a solution provider. And when somebody comes to you looking for the solution to a problem, first you solve their problem, and then you say to yourself, and this is what an entrepreneur does, then you say to yourself, what's the better problem that could be a solution for? And that's ultimately, where you come up with your killer disruption.
Cool. Dawn, does that resonate with you? I mean, given you mentioned being a life coach, that notion of empathy and listening and so forth, there's a related comment in the chat about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did spend in my many different roles, little career paths I took. I was a salesperson at one point. I sold advertising. And I guess I'll retract a little bit on what I said about the superpower, because if you want sales as a superpower, you can learn how to sell. I think sales has become like, sell is like a 4-letter word now. It's is associated with like the used car salesman, that kind of trope. And I agree with everything that was just said. It's just you can go and take courses on how to sell, and it will teach you how to listen and give you some phrasing that you might use if you don't have the phrasing of your own. It's just something that you can really go out and learn how to do. And so what sounded like was being described is like what's called a consultative sales approach. So I think if you were to Google consultative sales and just look at a YouTube video about it, it kind of breaks down for you how to listen, how to, engage the person in conversation to bring out what those pain points are, and then how to kind of present what you have as the natural solution to what the pain points are. I think there's also a book called Heart-Based Selling, and I think it's good. It sounds kind of, mushy heart-based selling, but it's good because it takes you through the same kind of thing about how to empathize and how to be solution-based. And it was good for me because I am motivated by helping people. And so it's hard for me to just sell you something if I don't think it's good for you, if I don't think it'll work. And so when I really started thinking about it, I'm really helping people by offering them what I have. And then having people say, you know what, thank you so much for offering me, this coaching program, because it really, I really needed it right now. It's really going to help me get to the next step. And I'm like, I'm helping people. But then I'm also like, but I'm making money, And it works. And I think if you figure out, kind of figure out what you're motivated by as well, then you can figure out how to frame the sales in your head, like I'm about solutions, I provide solutions, then that'll help to motivate you to provide solutions. Or me, I want to help. And now I'm out here helping everybody, but in actuality, I'm selling. And so, yeah.
Thanks, Dawn. I have just a couple of things to add to that, because I had the experience of starting out my career as a software engineer at AT&T and working on a couple of really heads down programming projects. And then they decided they needed technical people in sales. So I went into sales versus support, and then as an account manager on large sort of national worldwide accounts. And this isn't exactly a true story, but it's historical fiction in a way. I had colleagues that would be dealing with these big companies, and you would have one colleague who would go into a company and said, you need to take out all your PCs and put in 1,000 of ours. And that's my recommendation to you. And then another one that would go in and say, well, wait a minute, why are you saying that? All they need is a memory upgrade on the PCs that they have. They don't need to replace everything. They're fine. They just don't have enough memory. And then the other salesperson would say, well, but look at how much commission I'd make if they bought all new PCs. And that's why I've sort of got to the point where I love a good salesperson. I absolutely love a good salesperson, but I hate a bad one. I have no patience for it, because you figure that out after a while. And the person that said, just get the memory upgrade, well, what they would end up being is becoming indispensable to the customer, because the customer would then gain trust and say, hey, the next time I need something, I know that this person's not going to come in here and thinking about their commission and try to sell me a bunch of stuff I don't need. They're going to figure out what my pain points are, what my needs are, and what I have, and put the best deal in front of me. And once you get into that position where you're indispensable with the customer, then they're just going to automatically order from you time after time. So that's a pretty important thing. And then the other thing I learned in going into sales, as Dawn was saying, you could learn to be a salesperson. And a lot of times when people go into it, they think, well, you're a natural born salesperson or you're not. No, there actually is a science to it. There's a science to how you present things to people. There's a science of, again, of being able to look for pain points and being able to build a rapport with somebody and trust and actually become, you could build that superpower of being a great salesperson. You know, whether you want to call it that or just a consultant. But that is a skill set. And I mean, I read books at the time and they were great. They helped me a lot because I wasn't a natural born salesperson. I didn't need to be, but I could actually learn it. So you can go to Amazon now and just Google, you know, consultative selling or sales, and you'll find a lot of good existing material that will help you with that. So anyone else have something to add there, or we're going to try to move on to our final question. And that's what we're calling lightning advice. So put it to the EIR panel. Say you're talking to your 21-year-old self. What advice would you give yourself in, let's say, 6 words or less? And I know Gavin's going to say buy Bitcoin at 5 cents, but you know, maybe he's got something else to say. Gene, what would you tell your 21-year-old self?
I think the most important thing is to understand that everyone's wired differently. I know that I've said that before, but I think it crosses so many different topics that we've covered today. And the way that you figure out how to deal with that information is also really important. So, mental models, your biases in life, the way you understand the world, constantly challenge that. I think that's why there's a lot of discourse in the country, in the world.
Good. Thank you, Gene. I guess, you know, I put this question, I didn't really think about my answer, but probably thinking through and thinking about my 21-year-old self, I would say 5 words: you can change your situation. And that's something I've seen with some young entrepreneurs, and talking to them, and you get the impression that they think that this, whatever business idea they're working on, it's the last job they're ever going to have, and they're 20 years old. But it's really not. And I can think through points in my career where sometimes I maybe stuck with things too long or didn't think I could change the situation when really I could have easily done that. So I guess I'll pass. And how about you, Gavin? What would you actually tell your 21-year-old self?
I think I would probably tell my 21-year-old self, fail faster. I think there are a couple of entrepreneurial ventures where I held on too long. And I think if I failed faster and tried something else, I would have been happier.
Yeah, that there is that sort of like, countervailing forces of saying you got to like sometimes stick through it, and the chips are going to be down sometimes. And if you persevere, you'll pull through. But then there's also saying, give it up. Nobody wants diet pizza.
It's really hard to know when to pull the plug.
Right.
And yeah, if I could go back and do it again, there are a couple projects where I would have pulled the plug faster.
And I would also be careful, because I think at times in my life, and in a couple of the bad ideas that I've had, and I've had some good ones, a lot of times people try to be too polite and they don't want to criticize it. So they want to encourage you too. So watch out for those folks. They want to be helpful, but maybe they're not, because sometimes it's much better to give. I try to give more blunt criticism if I can, in addition to encouragement. Okay, who haven't I picked on here recently? So I won't pick on anyone else unless somebody wants to add to that, because I've picked enough, I feel. Anybody else want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add really quick, because I was sitting here thinking, I'm like, I would probably tell her to shut up, I thought I knew everything. You couldn't tell me anything. I was the expert on everything. I mean, I still think I know everything, but I know that I do not know everything. And so I think I would just tell her, just take a minute to observe, observe what's going on around you. Let's learn some things. You don't have to try to come in and be the CEO on the first day, of something. You can pay your dues, and you can learn from people that know a little something about the topic. Like, you don't have to come in and try to be the expert. So
Great. That's a good point. I was going to say maybe you had a superpower when you were 21, because even if you didn't know anything, you said it with confidence.
I sure did.
And people believe you if you say it with confidence.
It's a family trait.
Are there any things did I miss anything, Brant, you want to bring up or bring out here? Because I think we want to need to wrap up now and move on to the speed networking.
Yeah, Hope's put hers in. Maybe if Brett or Jean want to add there. I think the 6-word advice is great. I'll capture the chat. We'll get that posted somewhere. But no, that's been great. We can wind this down and move to a little bit of networking with who's ever's left.
Okay. Well, I'm hoping Randy is out there somewhere and could help us with the setting up the tables and such.
All anyone needs to do is go to their agenda on the Whova app and join the session for the networking tables, and it'll give you instructions on how to enter.
All right. Everyone cool with that?
And I definitely want to encourage people. I mean, I know we're all kind of over Zoomed, though I've been actually, this is some of the best time I've spent all day long, I will tell you, on the Zoom with all of you. But I'd love it if you guys, as many of you, would participate in a little bit of networking afterwards, if only out of self-interest. My self-interest is we want to learn how this Whova platform supports this kind of thing, and would be very interested in the experience and your feedback. So do the networking.
Yeah, the
Spend
network.
another half hour with us.
That'll be the fun part. Well, I want to thank all the EIRs. I really think, to use a term I never like to use, an embarrassment of riches, that we have so many great EIRs with so many great insights. And this has been, honestly, a lot of fun. Thank you, EIRs.
All right, so we're going to wrap up this Zoom session and then jump into the Whova app for networking.
Great.
All right, see you all. Thank you so much.